Objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Will Taylor, an intern in my office, be granted floor privileges for the remainder of Congress.
Also without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, today I want to discuss an issue that many folks may not be familiar with, but they should be. After today, they will be. When I first heard about this, I couldn't believe it was true. But I've learned up here that just when you think you've seen or heard the worst, the swamp will always surprise you. One of the many important roles of the Department of Justice is to represent the United States in civil and criminal trials. Sometimes the DOJ decides that a pretrial monetary settlement for a lawsuit is the best route to take. The DOJ directs the money from the settlement to the victims, or that's the way our system is supposed to work. But during the Obama administration, the DOJ took a different course. Rather than direct settlement money to victims, the DOJ pushed the defendants to give money instead to a third-party organization favored by the department. This was a slush fund for groups chosen by the DOJ. What's more, the DOJ would count the dollar amount of any donation as double toward the settlement. Money paid to the victims or the Treasury would only count dollar for dollar. So it was a huge incentive for these defendants to pay a third party, and these third parties often had nothing to do with the lawsuit. So when companies like J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, or Citigroup had to pay settlements based on mortgage lending practices, the DOJ unintentionally directed millions of dollars to liberal activist groups. So you don't have to take my word for it. Here's an email from the Office of the Associate Attorney General in 2013 talking about the DOJ's settlement with J.P. Morgan. Quote, "Can you explain to Tony the best way to allocate some money toward an organization of our choosing?" Those are the key words there, of our choosing. But let me continue to quote, "We have been discussing having the agreement provide that JPM agreed to pay $9 billion, but that if by the time we sign the settlement agreement, JPM has given $60 million to X, they will have to pay only $8 billion. I think that's okay. We understand that we would not have control over what X organization does with the money. The Tony referred to there is Tony West, an Associate Attorney General who was at that time number 3 in the Department of Justice. 2 days later, the Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights wrote to the Office of the Associate Attorney General to lobby on behalf of a group called Voice. The Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights includes the biggest activist arm of the political left, including the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, Big Labor, AFL-CIO, and the Teachers Union. But on number 3 here, but when the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights contacted the DOJ, it was because Voice wanted funds from the J.P. Morgan settlement. Not surprisingly, Voice ended up receiving $1 million from J.P. Morgan. They knew they'd have a listening ear in the Obama administration. And here's what a DOJ lawyer wrote to Tony West's deputy about DOJ's settlement with Citigroup. Chart 4. They were concerned with the possibility of Citi picking a group like, quote, the Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a conservative property, free rights, legal services. The DOJ was clear. Conservative groups couldn't have the access to the same funds that liberal groups could. It was obvious. Here was the result. Chart number 5. From Bank of America alone, the National Council of La Raza, now known as UNIDOS, U.S., received $1.5 million. The National Urban League received $1.2 million. Voice got another $1 million on top of the first million. This won't shock you, but both La Raza and the Urban League were big supporters of President Obama's agenda. They're also both members of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and Human Civil Rights today. La Raza consistently lobbied Congress to pass President Obama's misguided immigration reform bill. The Urban League was a routine cheerleader of the Obama administration's big government approach to public housing. They were rewarded for their advocacy with millions of dollars from the DOJ. In total, across the federal government, the money directed to third parties added up to a total of $668 million, according to the Nonpartisan Regulatory Transparency Project. On chart number 6, out of the $668 million, that could be on that at the end of the day could only locate $9.5 million, which is 1.4% of the total money given. We don't even know exactly where or how the rest of the money was spent. Folks, I got one word for you on this. This is called corruption. This is the swamp. The fact that this practice ever existed should make Americans' blood boil. Political appointees at one of the most powerful departments in the country used their position of power to extract money from corporate companies, and then they gave that money to their like-minded friends. That's what's wrong with Washington, D.C. We've grown used to hearing about this type of behavior from dictatorships around the world like Russia or Venezuela. We should not, we cannot accept this type of behavior here in the United States of America. Well, President Trump didn't. His administration, very early in his tenure, put a stop to this practice. They were right to do so. It should never have happened in the first place. But now, with the new president in office, and with so many high-profile Obama administration retreads throughout the administration and in the White House, this corrupt practice could and probably will return. Congress cannot allow this to happen. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat or an independent in the White House. The power of the purse lies with us, the folks in this building. It's called the 117th United States Congress. Elected officials, not bureaucrats. We need a permanent fix. If the federal government is diverting settlement funds away from victims and to politically connected groups, they're undermining Congress's role. There's a way to stop this. Earlier today, I introduced the Stop Settlement Slush Funds Act. This bill would ensure that all settlement funds would go first to the victims and then to the Treasury, no third party. No administration should be allowed to force donations to politically connected groups at the direct expense of victims. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this common sense solution. Let's ensure our federal government works on behalf of all of its citizens, not just the ones with connections to people in power. Mr. President, I notice the absence of the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.